The ranch lay burdened beneath the weight of winter, its stillness punctuated only by the deep creaks of the barn beams and the persistent sound of hooves shuffling in their stalls, seeking warmth against the chill. Silence enveloped the scene, devoid of any avian melodies. Even the sky appeared weary, sagging low and gray, weighed down by snow that lingered, reluctant to descend. Lena Kincaid often found herself awake before dawn, her boots laced and ready long before the rooster's crow broke the stillness of the morning. Her breath misted in the glow of the lantern as she moved through the kitchen, where bare shelves loomed, an ash-cooled stove stood silent, and a solitary mug remained, still damp from the tea of the previous night. She glided silently, like a gentle stream, mindful of not disturbing her father's slumber. 3 days had passed since he last exchanged words with her, not from a place of anger, but from something far more insidious, grief turned inward, ancient and unyielding. Ever since the fire last spring consumed part of the east fence and, with it, the remnants of his savings, he had been haunting his own home like a specter. Grunts had taken the place of salutations, work orders arrived with a subtle nod or a raised brow, and in the quiet moments that followed, Lena transformed into a woman, unnoticed by those around her. With shoulders squared against the biting wind, she transported the hay to the barn, a ritual as familiar as the changing seasons. The snow crunched underfoot, a biting layer that seeped into her calves. As she swung open the barn doors, the horses raised their heads, steam rising from their nostrils, curling in the chilly air like ethereal smoke signals. Yet, it was not solely the horses that awakened in the shadows of that morning. Initially, she believed it to be the sack of grain that had been carelessly placed too near the wall. Then it transformed. A figure huddled in the shadows of the back stall, enveloped by a cocoon of straw and saddle blankets. His hat hung low over his face, casting shadows that obscured his features, while his coat bore the marks of having endured 2 winters too many. One hand grasped a tattered piece of canvas, perhaps a satchel, pressed tightly against his chest, while the other dangled listlessly at his side, its fingertips tinged with blue. Lena remained silent. She seldom engaged in anything that could be described as loud. Instead, she retreated slowly, as if the very act of breathing could rouse him, and raised her lantern to gain a clearer view. His boots were nearly threadbare, and his cheekbones jutted sharply beneath a veil of unshaven stubble that had lingered for weeks. Whoever he may have been, he posed no threat, not at this moment. He appeared as though he were a remnant of the breeze swept in and left behind by the whims of nature. The horses remained calm. That revealed a truth to her. She knelt beside him, her fingers gently resting against his throat. Subtle heartbeat, existing, yet on the brink. She contemplated rousing her father, yet the man's presence, this enigma, seemed to belong solely to her, as if the universe had bestowed a secret upon her and entrusted her with its warmth. She placed the lantern beside his head and extended her hand toward the satchel, not to pilfer, merely to understand. A crumpled sheet of paper jutted out from the edge, its borders frayed and marked by the touch of moisture. With deliberate care, she pried it open, her fingers protesting against the biting chill. To my future wife, it commenced, her heart yet to flutter. She continued to read, her lips slightly parted. The letter was penned with a steady, deliberate hand. He introduced himself as Micah Quinn, a 25-year-old carpenter hailing from the eastern states. He had responded to an advertisement. He had dispatched funds. He had lingered in anticipation for a message. In the absence of any companions, he gathered his belongings and set forth towards the west regardless. She had mere moments before her father emerged to scrutinize the stock. He invariably began with the barn. He would encounter Micah, and he would refrain from inquiring. He might summon the sheriff or perhaps something even more dire. Her fingers brushed against Micah's shoulder. It is time to awaken. He blinked slowly, his eyes a muted gray, reminiscent of slate beneath the softening touch of thawing lashes. His voice was a rough whisper. I had no intention of intruding. Your chill was more inviting than the breeze. His head fell back down. Lena's hand lingered near his cheek, caught in a moment of indecision between offering comfort and pulling away. Ultimately, she abandoned him in his resting state, ensuring he was more adequately covered, and hurried to complete the tasks at hand before her father could detect any irregularities. As she stepped back into the kitchen, her father sat at the table, meticulously buttering stale bread, his concentration revealing a man well acquainted with the pangs of hunger. He averted his gaze. "The feed is low," she remarked. "Must venture into town this coming Tuesday." He let out a low grunt. "I shall choose the wagon." He remained silent. It had been months since he last did. Any aspirations he once harbored of protecting her from life's trials had perished the moment her wedding was annulled. The banker's son, who had once vowed to offer her a life of ease and Billings, reconsidered his intentions upon witnessing her amidst the cattle one spring morning, dust clinging to her dress and sweat beading at her brow. He desired lace, not leather. He never uttered a word about it again, yet the creases on his face grew more pronounced, as though her refusal had tarnished his sense of self-worth as well. Under the cover of darkness, she quietly made her way to the barn, carrying food in her hands. Micah sat up straight, his coat cinched tightly around his ribs, steam wafting from the bowl of soup she had placed in front of him. He acknowledged her with a subtle nod of gratitude, spoke briefly, yet his gaze trailed after her, imbued with a subtle understanding. She observed the manner in which he moved, as if he had been instructed to occupy less space than necessary. He chewed slowly, as though relishing a delicacy seldom encountered. And when she inquired softly about what had transpired, he refrained from spinning a lengthy tale. Simply stated, the bride had a change of heart. The missive never found its way to her. Perhaps it did after all. He bore no bitterness, not quite, more weary than anything. "I walked for a while," he said. "I thought it best to seek employment in some capacity. It seems I've stumbled upon your barn instead." "It doesn't belong to me," she remarked. "Not quite." He surveyed his surroundings. "It seems as though someone has managed to sustain its existence." She remained silent. She tightened her coat and settled across from him on the hay, both of them attuned to the wind as it rattled the doors. On the third day, he took to splitting logs unprompted, mending the broken hinge of the chicken coop, speaking little yet observing intently with gentle, discerning eyes. Her father observed. "Who is the man with the eyes of a dog?" he inquired, a blend of jest and caution in his voice. Lena remarked, "Just someone distant. I permitted him to remain for a night or two. Is he planning to leave?" She gazed through the window, observing Micah immersed in the water, diligently scrubbing the trough. "It seems he isn't contemplating anything significant. He simply lends a hand." Once more, her father emitted a low grunt. Not so much a sense of disapproval this time, but rather an air of resignation. On the seventh day, Micah transitioned from the barn to the modest bunkhouse nestled behind the stables. Lena had not extended an offer. It unfolded effortlessly, akin to the gentle melting of snow under the warmth of genuine kindness. He asserted no sense of belonging, refrained from overstepping boundaries, and lacked any charm. He remained unwavering like the dawn's first light. That, indeed, was the most peculiar aspect of it all. Lena had encountered men who sought to conquer her as if she were a hand in a card game, while others dismissed her for lacking the gentleness they desired. Yet Micah remained silent. He embraced silence as if it were a revered treasure. He perceived her presence without uttering a word. On a quiet night, she discovered him once more engrossed in the letter, its creases etched deeply from countless folds. He remained oblivious to her gaze. The outside air had fallen silent. The stove emitted a soft, warm glow, and in that stillness something nestled in Lena's chest that felt not like fear, but rather like the dawning of warmth. She withdrew from the threshold, allowing him to linger in the realm of his recollections. As she reclined in the stillness of her bed, she breathed his name into the shadows, savoring the way it lingered gently on her lips. Micah, a man who arrived devoid of expectation, who lingered without dignity, who regarded her not as a girl abandoned, but as a woman poised for recognition. The snow deepened outside, enveloping the ranch in a profound stillness once again. Yet this silence carried a distinct weight now. Not the quietude of emptiness, the hush of a new dawn unfolding. The days drifted by in a quiet embrace of frost and familiar patterns. Lena awoke in the stillness before dawn, tending to the horses, gathering kindling, and salting the path that connected the house to the barn. All the while the wind pushed against the world as if attempting to erase its existence. The sole addition, subtle, unwavering, and unvoiced, was the figure who traversed her father's territory like a whisper too gentle to disturb the earth. Micah made no request to remain. He did not once implore, negotiate, or allude to what he might be entitled to. He awoke, rose to his feet, and set about repairing the shattered pieces. He set to work on the crooked fence behind the north pasture, the one the cattle always leaned on, without waiting for permission. He substituted the corroded nails with those he had meticulously straightened at the forge. As the hinge let out a sharp squeal on the feedroom door, he applied oil to it quietly, without any show. His hands, thick-knuckled and flushed from the chill, toiled as if he had a debt to the earth. Lena found herself lingering in the shadows more frequently than she cared to confess. She was unfamiliar with men who carried themselves as if they belonged, yet never made a claim, who could cleave timber with a serene elegance, then cleanse the dinnerware as if it held profound significance. Every evening she delivered stew or any remnants she could pilfer from her father's plate. He never sought anything beyond what he had. He consistently held back until she had placed it in his hands, as though embracing her assistance too readily would diminish its value. "I will work," he murmured one evening, his voice barely a whisper beneath the vast expanse of stars. "You don't owe me a thing, yet I'll continue to strive for the nothing I possess." That caused her to blink. He remained expressionless, offering no words of clarification. He settled into the stew, a man well aware of the value of warmth, never one to take it for granted. Caleb Kincaid, her father, possessed sight. He observed the figure toiling in the fields. He caught sight of his daughter observing. Yet his words were few. That was his manner. Words were commodities to be measured out, akin to coffee or ammunition. He frowned more deeply, shaking his head as Micah drew too close to the porch, sipping his evening coffee in a brittle silence. On the seventh day, the bunkhouse stood immaculate, every corner meticulously swept and polished. By the ninth, Micah found himself nestled under a wool blanket that Lena had draped over the cot, indulging in the comforting illusion that it was a gesture from Granny Myrtle. "Kind of her," Micah remarked, his calloused fingers folding the edge of the quilt. "She's always dropping things off," Lena responded, her gaze avoiding his. "Loneliness is a curse best broken in pairs," she used to say. Micah merely nodded, as if the weight of that truth was too delicate to handle. Every evening, Lena made her way back to the house, her cheeks aglow, not merely from the chill in the air. She discovered herself lingering over her tasks, deliberately taking routes that brought her close to the bunkhouse, drawn by the glow of light spilling from his window. He never beckoned her. She never asked him to stay. Yet she sensed the weight of his gaze, lingering on her as she turned, as if he were etching her into his memory without crossing any boundaries. One morning, as the sun broke through the clouds and painted the sky with pink seams, Lena discovered her father waiting on the porch. He had his coat fastened all the way to the top, hands pressed against his sides as if preparing for an impending storm. "This man," he uttered, his gaze averted from her. "What are you doing?" "He was freezing," she said. "That doesn't address my inquiry. I provided him with food. Let him stay." He turned then, his face etched by the relentless wind and the weight of countless sorrows. "What do you seek in a man of that nature?" "I'm not looking," she said. "He's just here." Caleb snorted. "People don't simply appear. They arrive bearing intentions with desires. Mark me." "He's hiding something," Lena bristled. "Or perhaps he's simply weary, just like us." Her father squinted, examining her as if she were an unfamiliar figure communicating in a dialect he had no desire to understand. He pivoted on his heel and stepped through the doorway. Lena lingered on the porch for what felt like an eternity, her hands tightly wrapped within the confines of her sleeves. As she pivoted, her gaze fell upon Micah by the woodpile, methodically splitting logs with a serene cadence that remained unbroken throughout their exchange. As the day wore on, she found her way to him by the smokehouse. In quietude they toiled, transferring cuts of meat to be hung and salted. "Do you always put in this much effort?" she inquired. He merely shrugged, uncertain of how to bring it to a close. Her lips remained unmoving, yet there was a gentleness in her tone. "That letter, the one your bride never replied to." He hesitated, not out of discomfort, but rather deep thought. "No, I hold no resentment towards her. I am not what one might deem promising, a carpenter devoid of a workshop. No land to call my own. No elaborate words, just action. Yet you still arrived." He nodded. It didn't seem appropriate to halt. Somewhere between Indiana and this place, the focus shifted from the woman to the journey itself. "That echoes the words of a preacher." He offered the faintest smile. Perhaps I'm merely trying to find clarity in a futile pursuit. They returned to their tasks, yet the atmosphere surrounding them had shifted. It was no longer electric, instead it carried a softer quality, like a bridge only partially constructed. That night, a tempest arrived with a fierce intensity, battering branches against the roof and provoking the cattle into restless lowing. Lena dashed outside, her coat billowing behind her like a banner. Micah intercepted her midway between the barn and the porch, lantern glowing in his grasp. "I'll check the east gate," he said. "I'll get the foal," she replied without pause. They didn't argue, didn't hesitate. They glided through the scene with the ease of seasoned veterans, despite this being their inaugural challenge. Snow whipped across their path, while the wind roared fiercely from the hills above. Lena discovered the foal huddled in the corner, its legs quaking with cold. With a grunt, she hoisted it up, her muscles protesting, arms aflame with effort. As she stumbled toward the barn, the wind threatened to knock her off balance. Yet, in that moment, Micah appeared, his coat drenched, eyes aflame with intensity. Wordlessly, he accepted the foal from her embrace, holding it as if it were a sacred relic, and moved with grace into the welcoming straw, never faltering. She trailed behind, her breath caught in her throat. He gently placed the creature on the ground, draping it with burlap before turning to her. Snowflakes clung to his lashes. "You all right?" he inquired. "I'm not glass," she declared, her knees trembling beneath her. He extended his hand, tentative and slow, gently tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "No, you're not," he replied. They lingered in that moment, suspended in time. She felt the rhythm of her heart, caught a glimpse of herself mirrored in the depths of his gaze. Then, with a quiet resolve, she took a step back. The moment slipped away, yet it lingered in the air. 2 nights later, Granny Myrtle made her entrance, wrapped in layers of wool and a fragrance reminiscent of violets. She claimed to have come bearing quilt scraps, but her gaze, peering over her spectacles, was also drawn to Lena, curious about the intriguing gentleman the snow had brought forth. Micah grasped her hand, his touch warm and respectful. Granny smirked. "He's a quiet one," she murmured to Lena as he turned away. "Silence can be perilous." "Perilous in what way?" "It's the silent ones to whom you confide your deepest secrets." Lena remained silent, just observed Micah kneeling by the stove, coaxing flame from damp wood. That night, the ranch slumbered more deeply. The air had softened, as if the land itself sensed a change had taken place. Lena lay awake, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, attuned to the wind's gradual retreat. Her mind wandered to Micah's hands, not in the context of their caress, but in the way they cradled. She recalled how he lifted burdens with a tenderness that belied their weight. The way he gazed at her was not that of a man envisioning a future, but rather one who truly saw her, complete, resilient, sufficient, and that, more than any allure or assurances, was what made her breath falter. It wasn't that he chose to remain, rather, he never even inquired about it. The snow lay so solidly that it fractured underfoot like brittle bone. January had hollowed out the landscape, peeling bark from trees and warmth from the air. Each movement demanded greater exertion now. Horses stood rigid in the morning chill, hinges creaked softly, and Lena's hands bore blisters from hauling too many buckets with icy rope handles. The cold imposed its will without hesitation. It seeped into her very bones and lingered. Micah had been quiet that week, but then so had she. She realized that words were akin to firewood, valuable and best reserved for the coldest of nights. Yet he remained steadfast at every juncture, chopping, hauling, mending. He navigated with a serene determination, as though fulfilling an obligation that had never been demanded of him. He respected boundaries, never overstepped, yet his mere existence had started to carve a root in her heart, much like his boots had etched a trail in the snow from bunkhouse to barn, her father observed. There was no need for words. The silence that enveloped them had become tense, fragile. Each morning, he placed his coffee cup down with increasing force, his eyes following Micah from beneath the shadow of his hat. Meanwhile, Lena sensed a growing chasm between them, an invisible barrier that had suddenly appeared. Then, the fire ignited. It started with a mere flicker, an awkward movement of a lantern as Lena sought the saddle soap. In an instant, the barn, filled with the comforting warmth of straw and the gentle sounds of horses at rest, transformed. Flames leapt up the wooden post, eager and alive, as if searching for something to grasp. She cried out, attempting to suffocate the fire with burlap. Yet the wind outside had discovered a fissure, eagerly feeding the blaze. It surged along the beam and sprang to the roof as if it were famished. She dashed away, not towards the house, but towards the bunkhouse. Micah erupted forth before she could even touch the door. His coat hung loosely, boots flapping with every hurried step, axe gripped tightly in his hand. No questions were posed. He dashed past her, plunging into the radiance. The barn blazed fiercely in two corners, smoke swirling like dense wool. Micah yanked open stalls, his coat sleeve pressed against his mouth. The horses surged forward into the frigid air, their eyes wide and breath visible in the chill. Lena pursued them, her cough echoing as she wrestled with the hay bales, her boots striking the ground as she kicked open the rear doors. Only one stall was left, housing the mare and her trembling newborn foal, huddled in the distant corner. Without a moment's pause, Micah released the axe, leaped over the stall gate, and cradled the foal in his arms as if it were a mere feather. The mare trailed behind, her soft whinnies tinged with fear. Yet he advanced with a deliberate slowness to avoid alarming her. The smoke grew denser, curling ominously. Flames danced hungrily against the rafters. Lena's voice faltered, trembling in the chaos. Micah emerged from the smoke moments later, his eyes rimmed with red, hair singed at the edges, cradling the foal against his chest. Silence enveloped him. He strolled past her, carefully placing the creature onto the snow, then sank to his knees beside it. She followed suit, dropping down next to him. His hands bore the marks of blistering pain. The left side of his coat bore the scars of flames. The night wailed with a chilling intensity. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his face. "You ought to have paused. Yet you did not." Those words seeped into her like warm tea into frost-bitten limbs. They remained away from the house, not just yet. They lingered beside the foal until the wind calmed, until the smoke dissipated into the darkened sky, leaving the barn charred yet standing. The fire had claimed little, yet it felt as though it had stripped away everything. At last they retreated to the bunkhouse, their silence heavy between them. She gathered ointment and rags with a quiet determination. He perched on the cot, elbows resting on his knees, allowing her to care for his hands. He flinched just once. "You're fortunate," she remarked. "No more painful than a burn, yet it feels far worse." Her smile was fleeting and subtle. In that moment, you became her savior. There was no hesitation, no second thoughts, just instinctive action. "That's your nature, isn't it? You simply keep going." He glanced upward then, and a transformation flickered across his face. It had softened, sharpened, perhaps a blend of both. "I move," he said. "But I've never stayed, not once." She settled back on her heels, contemplating the question. Why not? No one had ever provided her with a reason to think otherwise. Lena rose slowly to her feet. The bunkhouse appeared to shrink in size, as though her very breath consumed more of the air within. The oil lamp cast a dim glow from its perch on the shelf. Outside, the storm had quieted, enveloping the world in a silence that heralded the dawn. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "What if someone were to?" He remained silent. She moved to the stove, tending to the glowing coals. Her hands quivered, yet she maintained their steadiness. This moment was unlike any other. Not with the son of a banker, nor with any of the ranch hands who had come and gone. This was not a proposal. This was not a dream woven from words or delicate fabric. It was survival, enveloped in a profound understanding. "You don't owe me anything," she said, "but I need you to know something." He turned toward her. She locked eyes with him, a silent connection forming between them. "You bring life back to this space." Micah stood up, deliberate, calculated. His hands, now bound, rested at his sides like heavy weights. He traversed the room in 4 deliberate strides, halting just shy of her presence. "I don't know what I am," he confessed, "but I know how to remain." Outside, a delicate gold line began to carve the horizon. "I have no family," he added. "No land to call my own. Only these hands and the lessons they carry." "I've never had anyone choose me without a reason," she whispered. "Not because they were obligated to, not out of desire for something." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a neatly folded slip of paper. The letter. It was intended for a woman who had never responded. He presented it to her. "Incinerate." She paused, her fingers lingering in uncertainty. Finally, she extended her hand and enveloped the parchment within her grasp. She moved to the stove, lifted the firebox lid, and placed the letter on the glowing embers. It began to curl quietly. The edges turned black. The ink seeped away, disappearing into the void. As she glanced back, he remained there, palms outstretched, and she spoke the words, unadorned, "Marry me." He blinked, taken aback. Not for romance, not just yet, seeking something more reliable, something that will endure the winter's chill. Micah moved in closer. He refrained from questioning her sincerity. He made no effort to gauge her determination. "I will marry you," he declared, "but only if you make me one promise." She nodded in agreement. "Anything. If I choose to remain, truly remain, will you allow me to become more than what this land requires?" Her throat constricted. "I wish for you to embrace your true self, even if it remains a mystery to me for now." He inhaled deeply, reminiscent of a man emerging into fresh, untainted air. He reached for her hand, encased in his bandaged grip. "Yes," he affirmed before the sun. Granny Myrtle made her entrance 30 minutes later, swathed in quilts and a palpable sense of indignation, grumbling about how she was freezing her backside off for a pair of lovebirds who couldn't be bothered to wait for spring. Yet, upon catching sight of their expressions, smudged with smoke, kissed by the wind, and glowing with an inner light, her words faltered. They lingered in the clearing beside the icy stream. The sky started to bleed hues of lavender and gold. Trees stretched their shadows long across the snow. The air was thick with a peculiar hush, as if the entire world had leaned in to listen. Granny cradled a Bible, its leather worn and cracked. She read the words with a deliberate slowness, a steady assurance. She referred to them as husband and wife, even before the frost had a chance to melt from their boots. Lena wore no ring, and Micah had yet to pen his vows. Yet their gazes remained unwaveringly locked, and that was sufficient. The flames in the barn had extinguished. The ranch lay in slumber. Her father remained inside still, yet she envisioned that he was aware. The imagined crunch of her boots in the snow spoke volumes to him. They sought no approval. Love, she had discovered, often arrived without the promise of blessings. At times it arrived cloaked in smoke and silence. At other moments it manifested through scorched hands and the chill of winter's breath. Once the words were uttered, Micah lowered his head, not to kiss her, but to rest his forehead against hers. A pause in time. A whisper of promise. They strolled back to the bunkhouse, their footsteps echoing in unison. Their shadows trailed behind, elongated and intertwined, resembling twin roots just starting to delve into the earth. As they traversed the yard, the front door of the main house groaned open. Her father emerged, hat pulled low over his brow. With his hands tucked deep into his coat, he remained silent. His gaze lingered on them, weighted and intense. Micah came to a halt. Lena, however, pressed on. She locked eyes with her father and gave a subtle nod. Neither a request nor a challenge, simply a statement of reality. Her father's gaze wandered to the smokehouse, then to the barn, still marked yet resilient. His eyes settled on Micah. He made no move for his gun. He didn't spit. He uttered a single word. "Boy." Micah raised his chin. "Sir." Her father maintained his gaze for a fleeting moment before turning and retreating indoors. The door closed softly behind him. That was all there was to it. Yet it was sufficient. That night, as the stars ascended fiercely and luminously over the plains, Lena and Micah found themselves in the doorway of the bunkhouse, their shoulders brushing against one another. He clasped her hand as if it were an old companion. She leaned into him, not out of fatigue, but by deliberate choice. Silence enveloped them. The weight of unspoken words lingered in the air, having fulfilled their purpose. Now it was time for life to unfold its next chapter. She leaned against him, her head finding solace on his shoulder, as the wind whispered through the grass, gentler now, as if winter had momentarily released its hold. The flames had consumed something, yet within the remnants they had forged a promise. Before the first light of dawn, with only the chill and the glow of the fire to bear witness, they had made the choice to remain. The morning following the vow was steeped in the metallic tang of iron and the chill of frost. It hung thick in the atmosphere, quiet and frigid, reminiscent of breath suspended in silence before it burst forth into words. Lena stirred not to the sounds of jubilation, but to an enveloping stillness. Her hand, unadorned and devoid of any ring, rested gently on Micah's chest as he breathed slowly beneath the quilt. She observed the rhythmic rise and fall of his body, pondering whether marriage ever truly commenced in such a hushed manner. Not with the clamor of bells, but with a profound, unwavering calm. Micah stirred under her touch, a faint, weary smile gracing his lips. His hands, singed and now swathed in linen and soothed with salve, curled tenderly around hers. "I dreamed we were creating something," he whispered. "We are," she murmured, her voice thick with slumber. "But first comes the reckoning." He sat up gradually, a wince escaping him, and cast a glance toward the bunkhouse door. She understood the silent understanding that lingered in the air. Her father remained quiet, his gaze following their footprints as they faded into the snow. Yet, silence carried its own tempest, and Lena had spent enough time in its looming presence to recognize the piercing clarity that accompanied its eventual shatter. As the sun cast its golden hue upon the hills, her father was already mounted and traversing the pasture fence line, a familiar routine following a long night. Perhaps it was a ritual, a means to shed the burdensome thoughts that weighed too heavily to bring inside. Lena discovered him at the southern boundary of the property, where the snow had receded to reveal dry grass, and the wind had sculpted the earth into rugged ridges. He remained still as she drew near. "I'm married," she stated plainly. "I know." His voice was devoid of any quiver, as flat as a sheet of hammered tin. "He didn't take anything," she added. "I offered everything, without reservation." Caleb Kincaid stood there, arms crossed, gloved hands buried deep in his sleeves. "Do you believe I care for virtue? I suspect you care for control." That made him turn. The look he gave her wasn't one of anger. It was worse. Raw disappointment tinged with something more profound. Perhaps it is fear, or perhaps it is loss. "Do you believe I am unaware of your true nature?" he inquired. "Do you think I cannot perceive you? I have witnessed your tireless dedication to this land. I've watched every single man slip away from you, for you possess a strength that renders them unnecessary. And now, you choose to wed a wanderer, a man marked by scars and silence. And I am meant to simply offer my blessing." Lena stood firm, despite the ache in her throat. "You haven't blessed anything in ages." He fixed his gaze on her, his breath coming in heavy bursts. "Do you truly believe I don't love you? Is that what you think? It seems you've forgotten how to feel." That struck hard, like a punch. He turned his gaze elsewhere. For an extended moment, neither of them stirred. Finally, Caleb broke the silence, his voice dropping to a softer tone. "Do you know what I see when I gaze at you? Your mother, with that resolute chin and those unyielding eyes. And I recall the day I laid her to rest in snow much like this. You were wailing in your cradle, and I cradled you, pondering how God had taken one and left me with the other. I find myself at a loss with that reality." Lena's breath hitched. "I loved her so much," he confessed. "And I feared I'd lose you as well. I clung too fiercely, transforming every moment into a struggle for survival rather than embracing the essence of joy. Not softness. You closed me off," she murmured. "I believed it would protect you. It did not." A bird soared above, its wings glimmering in the dawn's embrace. Neither of them glanced skyward. "I didn't marry him to spite you," she said after a pause. "I married him because, for the first time, someone looked at me as more than just the sum of what I could carry or fix. He truly saw me, and I didn't have to earn that." Caleb exhaled as if he had been holding his breath for an eternity. "You love him. I have faith in him. Perhaps that holds greater significance at this moment." He ran a hand over his time-worn visage. "I find myself at a loss on how to release." "You don't have to let go," she said softly. "Just make room." The sun illuminated the hills. Light poured over the landscape, draping the snow in a golden hue. Caleb glanced at the barn, then at the house, caught in a silent dilemma between what was and what could be. He remained silent, the weight of his thoughts hanging in the air. He ambled away, heading toward the house, his pace leisurely, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Lena observed him until he vanished from sight. Later, she discovered Micah arranging the remnants of the unburned firewood. The bandages wrapped around his hands bore the marks of toil, and beads of sweat clung to his brow. She approached him, gently relieving him of the log he held, placing it down with care. "He doesn't hate you," she reassured him. Micah let out a soft snort. "It resonates with how he feels. Change isn't something he readily accepts without his approval." Micah pivoted to confront her. "And you, I've been anticipating change ever since I first learned to ride." He observed her intently, then leaned in, resting his forehead against hers once more, reminiscent of their wedding morning. It wasn't desire that compelled them, but a profound sense of being. The unspoken understanding of two souls who had traversed through flames, emerging marked yet unyielding. The day unfolded slowly, laden with tasks and fleeting looks. Just before twilight, Granny Myrtle arrived, a kettle of soup cradled in one hand and a box in the other. "What's this?" Lena inquired. "Your mother's belongings," Myrtle remarked. "I've kept them for years. I thought now would be the right moment." Within the confines of the box lay a quilt, soft and worn, a brooch shaped like a sparrow, an unfinished letter, and a wedding dress swathed in tissue that had yellowed with time. Lena caressed it as one would a cherished memory. With utmost care, with reverence. "She would have wanted you to wear it," Myrtle said. "I didn't have a church or music," Lena whispered. "You had firelight and a man who would have burned with you." That night, Lena draped the dress over the bed in the bunkhouse. Micah lingered in the doorway, observing her. "She was beautiful," he remarked. "So was her silence," Lena replied. "I think I learned it from her." Micah stepped forward, his fingers grazing the fabric before trailing gently across her arm. "We shall fill this space with a cacophony of sound," he vowed, "with joyous laughter, with the rhythmic pounding of hammers, with fresh tales waiting to be told." Lena glanced at him, "And, if the narratives conclude with sorrow, we shall craft new ones." As the stars illuminated the night sky once again, Lena ventured outside. Snow fell gently. Its harshness faded. The barn loomed in shadow, yet remained intact. The house radiated warmth from its depths, soft lights spilling through the windows as if offering a long-awaited welcome. Footsteps echoed behind her, and from the shadows her father appeared, cradling a small wooden box. He extended it toward her, devoid of any flourish. She accepted it, lifting the lid with a sense of anticipation. Inside, a folded deed awaited her, and beneath it, a silver ring that had been hidden from the light for 20 long years. "It belonged to her," Caleb insisted, "and now it belongs to you, whatever the future may hold." Lena felt a constriction in her throat. She extended her hand, not merely for the box, but to grasp his hand as well. He remained steadfast, not retreating. Micah emerged to join the group, his silence as profound as always. Caleb's gaze locked onto his. In their depths, warmth was absent, yet something akin lingered. "You stay?" he inquired. "Yes, sir," Micah replied. "And you intend to treat her well?" "I already am." A deep breath, a measured nod. Caleb pivoted and strode back into the house. The door left ajar in his wake. It was neither an invitation nor a barrier. Lena's gaze shifted to Micah. "That's as near as we shall arrive." Micah smiled. "Near is sufficient for the moment." Under the vast expanse of stars, two silhouettes emerged, etched in frost and illuminated by the flickering firelight. There were no lofty vows exchanged, no bold proclamations made, only existence, only a vow brought to life. The moment of truth had arrived, not through loud proclamations, but in hushed admissions, in the surrender of arrogance, in the release of past sorrows. As the wind gentled and the earth exhaled into slumber, Lena sensed a movement within her chest. Not hope, not precisely, something more resilient, something that would endure the tempests yet to arrive. The thaw advanced gradually, akin to a prayer softly murmured by the very ground. Initially there was the sound, the gentle flow of water meandering beneath the snow's embrace, the gradual drop of ice cascading from the rooftops, the muted thump of boots, no longer crunching but yielding to the softened earth below. Then the aroma enveloped her. Damp wood, fresh earth, the faint trace of smoke from a stove that offered warmth rather than necessity. Trees, once brittle and bare, began to swell with the promise of renewal. In the midst of this awakening, Lena discovered herself transforming in ways she had never anticipated. On that morning when she sensed a change within her, it was not fear that gripped her, but rather a serene stillness and a moment of reflection. She settled onto the porch swing that Micah had crafted just 2 weeks earlier, each curve shaped by his hands, each surface polished with intention. With a gentle touch, she laid her palm against her belly, where a new heartbeat had started to echo softly. It was a quiet sound, reminiscent of a gentle knock from within, a beginning. She remained silent initially, allowing the understanding to unfurl within her like the first crocus breaking through the snow. Micah, however, felt it. He possessed that quality, attuned to her quietude, the rhythm of her inhalations. One evening he returned from repairing the gate, earth marking his forearms, sun-kissed at the neckline. He knelt to loosen his boots, then lifted his gaze to meet hers over the hearth. "You've been different," he remarked. She stirred the stew thoughtfully. "Have I?" she replied. "Not in a way that concerns me." It was a silence that felt deeper, richer, as if she were cradling an unspoken truth. Her gaze met his, calmly now. "Place the ladle aside. I believe I am with child." Micah remained still for what felt like an eternity. Finally he rose, traversed the space between them in 3 purposeful strides, and knelt before her, his hands gently placed on her knees. "Are you certain?" he asked. "No. Yet, I understand." He leaned his forehead against her leg. When he finally uttered a word, his voice trembled with wonder, not trepidation. "Never did I imagine I would become entwined in something so genuine." Lena breathed out softly, her fingers tracing the contour of his shoulder. "Neither did I." In the days that followed, they moved to a new cadence. Micah set about crafting a cradle from remnants of wood, tenderly smoothing each corner as if it were a sacred endeavor. Lena tended to the herbs beside the porch, kneeling in the moist earth, infusing life into the soil with the delicate touch of her fingertips. The ranch unfurled once more, reminiscent of a bear stirring from its slumber. Her father observed it all with the cautious gaze of one who has witnessed tempests arise from clear skies. He joined them for dinner occasionally, spoke little, yet lingered longer than before. One morning he arrived with lumber for Micah, grumbling under his breath about the need for fence repairs, despite the fact that Micah had already constructed it twice. Lena chose not to inquire further. Occasionally, a gesture of kindness could be disguised as a burden. And then there came the moment when he presented her with the quilt. It belonged to her mother, a design of migrating geese intricately woven into a fabric reminiscent of the sky. Caleb placed it on the table in silence before stepping out onto the porch, the door swaying softly behind him. Lena traced her fingers over the delicate stitches. Some were tidy, others were rough, much like the love that had nurtured her. That evening they spread the quilt across their bed, and Micah cradled her as if she were still composed of snow, requiring protection from the warmth that could cause her to dissolve. Yet it was Lena who anchored him, softly murmuring, "We're here. We're grounded." Spring blossomed further. The ranch thrummed with life. Chicks emerged from their shells. Cows welcomed their calves amidst the swaying tall grass. The complete Micah had captured now elusive butterflies, their legs stretching far beyond their petite bodies. Each evening, Lena penned delicate notes in the weathered ledger by the kitchen window. These were not records of debts or feed expenses, but reflections on life itself. Micah's laughter echoed softly, her father's gaze lingering on the porch swing, unaware of her watchful eyes. A sudden yearning for blackberries washed over her. Yet Lena understood that peace did not equate to stillness. One afternoon she stumbled upon Micah, nestled in the barn, asleep among the hay, beside the cradle yet to be completed. The light cascaded over his face, rich and warm, reminiscent of honey. For a fleeting moment she remained still, her hand pressed against the doorframe, her heart momentarily halted. He appeared just as he had on that initial morning, weathered and worn, with his lips slightly parted. Yet this time he felt warmth. He was home, and there was something in that image that constricted her throat. She moved closer, mindful of his slumber, and noticed a fragment of carved wood beside him, the headboard of the cradle still in progress, with her name inscribed in his calm, intentional script. Lena, devoid of embellishment, simply the essence of her, captured in the texture of the wood. She settled down next to him. For a fleeting instant, the universe condensed into breath, straw, and the rhythmic pulse of the child nestled within her. Micah stirred, his eyes fluttering open, a sleepy smile gracing his lips. "Caught me! Do you construct even in your dreams?" "I create to ensure that the dreams remain intact." She grasped his hand. "I never imagined I would find myself woven into someone else's designs." "You're not a part," he replied. "You are the cause." As the evening wore on, thunder rumbled in the distance. Deep and languid, it crept along the horizon before revealing itself. Lena stood on the porch, one hand resting on her stomach, the other gripping the railing. Micah approached, cradling a cup of warm tea, his gaze drifting across the clouds. "Do you feel that?" he asked, as if sensing an impending shift. Tempest, transformation. A distant flash of lightning illuminated the horizon. The wind began to howl. Caleb emerged in the doorway behind them. "You two had better come inside," he urged. This one could be quite thunderous. Indeed, it was. The rain poured in torrents, cutting through the field, beating against the roof with a timeless cadence. Lena stood by the window, observing the water inundate the yard, the troughs, the firewood stack. Micah approached her from behind. "It'll pass," he assured her. She nodded. Yet a tension coiled within her. Not fear. Anticipation hung in the air. The following morning the atmosphere felt refreshed, as if it had been meticulously cleansed. The sun ascended, vibrant and radiant, casting a luminous glow over the ranch, which sparkled as though it had just come into existence. Lena traversed the earth with bare feet, allowing the cool, moist soil to embrace her soles. She strolled past the garden, the chicken coop, and the bunkhouse, now repurposed for storage. The barn stood ajar, its fragrant hay drifting into the air. She entered the room and hesitated. Her father was there, cradling the completed cradle in his hands. "I added the last rail," he said. "You left it out." She approached slowly. "I never intended for it to happen." "It wasn't an error," he insisted. "You had been anticipating it." She nodded. He placed the cradle gently on the floor, and they both gazed at it in silence. "I didn't know how to be a father to a girl who didn't cry," he admitted. "I once believed that strength was synonymous with silence," but she countered, "It is not. True strength lies in the choice to remain even when the silence is painful." He swallowed hard. "I remained for the land. I ought to have remained for you." He gazed at her belly before meeting her eyes. "You still have the chance. You'll excel at this far more than I ever did." "I learned by watching," she said, "what not to do and what still matters." At that moment, Micah stepped into the barn, caught sight of them, and hesitated. Caleb adjusted his posture. For a moment, silence enveloped them, each lost in thought. Then, with a deliberate grace, Caleb moved closer and reached out his hand to Micah. Micah accepted the gesture, their hands meeting in a quiet acknowledgement. It lacked grandeur. It was never meant to be. Later that day, Lena brought the cradle inside the house. She placed it by the window, where the gentle breeze carried the fragrance of wild sage and pine. Carefully, she arranged the quilt within, smoothing its edges before settling back, her hand resting on her belly. Outside, Micah drove the last nail into the front gate. Her father toiled in the east field. The foal raced in carefree circles by the fence, while Granny Myrtle's laughter floated down the road, her voice playfully chastising her mule for its sluggishness. All was ordinary, and in that simplicity, there lay a sense of the sacred. That night, Lena settled onto the porch swing, Micah by her side, as the stars blazed overhead like scattered prayers. "Do you think we'll be enough?" she inquired. "We already are," he replied. She rested her head against his shoulder. "What if it becomes difficult once more? Then we hold on to this moment. This." He waved toward the field, the stars, the stillness enveloping them. "This tranquility, this foundation, this promise was one we forged without struggle, crafted through our shared efforts." She smiled, a small yet unwavering expression. Micah's gaze met hers. "You rescued me, Lena." "You were never truly lost," she replied, merely biding your time to be discovered in the right moment. They lingered long after the lanterns had faded, and as the wind rustled the grass, soft and verdant once more, it murmured across the land like a sacred song. Spring had arrived during their slumber, yet now they were fully awake. Vibrant and unafraid, they embraced the moment.